next guest is Rabbi Danny Bergson. Rabbi has been the Rabbi of Pinner Synagogue since 2011. Prior to that, he was Rabbi in Newton Mearns Glasgow. He holds a degree in computer science from Manchester University. Rabbi is also a trained cantor and guitarist, passionate about using music and song to inspire and positively influence all the people he meets or works with. He's currently involved in 2 major music projects. One is part of an interfaith band called All Faith, which aims to bring together different faiths and produce music of universal appeal, and is finishing work on his first Jewish album, which is a mix of rock, jazz, and acoustic music. Sounds very interesting. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
First of all, thank you so much, Kumail, and for all those at the SICM community for inviting me today. Just to make a couple of corrections, I had produced the album actually a few years ago, and I'm no longer involved, unfortunately, in the interfaith music, although it was an amazing experience at the time. I was asked to speak today about social action, although I have changed the title to Righteous Action versus Social Action. And as I was listening to the wonderful speakers preceding me, I was also finding myself staring at this incredible building, the Salam Center, and actually reminding me of a few years ago when, I think it was the founding stone was 3 years ago now, or 4 years ago? 3 years ago, that was my first introduction to your wonderful, wonderful, warm and welcoming community. I came with my former chairman, Howard Freeman at the time, who, amazing twist of events, today is actually celebrating the engagement of his daughter. So yeah, and I was looking at this incredible structure, and I'm no scholar of Islamic architecture, but I was thinking about our temple from the Jewish temple times that was on the Temple Mount some 2,000 years ago, and before that 2,500 years ago, the first temple. And I was looking at all the amazing glasses and the spaces in the structure over there as a sort of symbol of a beacon of light to the world. I don't know if that was the intention, sort of sparks of light coming into the world. And it reminded me of the temple structure where they didn't have glass in those days, but they had sort of windows which were wider on the outside and thin on the inside, as opposed to in medieval times where it would be the other way around. So you had a wide angle to shoot out to the enemy, but of course they couldn't get you. It was the opposite way around, as of course a house of God doesn't need protection, but rather it's spreading its light in as many directions as possible. And that's very much to me what the SICM community, the Shiite Nashri community of Middlesex, represents. It sounds much better in the full, doesn't it? Nashri. Because that's what I feel every time I come here. I feel a sense of warmth, a sense of belonging. I feel that I'm able to speak openly, share opinions, and even if we differ on things at times, and that's a really important thing. So let me move on to my topic today. Bear me with a few notes. Righteous action versus social action. So what is social action? We talk about it in the media, it's buzzing, it's twittering, it's everything. It's basically defined as taking steps to change the things that are wrong in our society and introducing new ideas, processes for doing things better in the future. But as a faith leader, I like to think of this as righteous action, in the sense that there's a moral obligation and duty. It's not a hobby. Oh, I'm into social action, what are you into? It's something that comes from God. A duty, so to speak, that comes from God to help others. And as people of faith, we must feel it as a calling. The desire to help others in need should be our instinctive reaction. In Hebrew, we have the phrase gemilut chasadim, which roughly translates as the bestowal of kindness or acts of kindness, which stems from the acknowledgement that all human beings are created in the image of God. So when we talk about breaking down our divisions and looking for that which we share, what more can we share from a religious perspective? We have a very powerful position to argue to the world. We share more than anybody in the sense that we as human beings are made in the image of God. That's an essential connection. It's not just we may share the same geographic location, we may share the same names or the same cars, or we go to the same schools. It's much more essential what connects us as human beings. And actually our tradition teaches that the world stands on 3 pillars, which are in Hebrew Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim, which broadly speaking translates as Torah, spiritual wisdom, godly instruction, which for the Muslim community will obviously be the Quran and the associated teachings. Avodah, which broadly speaking is our spiritual service and prayer, and Gemilut Chasadim, which I mentioned is acts of kindness. In other words, we can develop as communities, as societies, with piety through the first two pillars, but ultimately it's like, imagine a chair with two legs. It's going to fall if we don't have it. It's like a world collapsing in on itself if we just don't have that basic sense of acting for others. And it's not just, of course, helping our co-religionists, as we taught in the Bible, do not oppress the stranger, because you were strangers, referring in that sense to the Israelites, you were strangers in Egypt. In other words, acts of kindness are not just about helping those who are within our community, but pointing outwards to the community outside. I thought there's a wonderful example in the Bible I'd like to share with you from Abraham, who we all share as a forefather, who actually challenges God himself when it comes to Sodom and Gomorrah. They're going to be destroyed for their sinful behavior, and God Abraham turns to him and says, "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be like the wicked. Far be it from you." And famously, "Will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice?" The message here is very powerful. Man cannot just tolerate suffering of others. It's not enough for him but he must even challenge God himself. We must develop a worldview that pulsates with a desire to improve our society, even if it means shouting at God, so to speak. This seems to be a concept derived from the Bible. And we've heard this afternoon about the complex geopolitical world that we live in. And I think this is a challenge for faith leaders, because we're not politicians. It's not always so clear what's right and what's wrong. But I think in all the complexity, take, for example, the refugee crisis, which is one of global proportions, which looks like it will be continuing to be with us for decades to come. I think what we can learn as faith leaders, and when I say faith leaders, we're all faith leaders if we're part of faith communities, is that however complex the issue, we must, as people of faith, not shy away from voicing our concerns, and where necessary, speaking truth to power. But we must be careful in understanding and de-picking politics from actually faith. I think that's an important thing. I've always been very impressed with the SICM community and how you reach out and do interfaith work. I think what I'm about to state is probably self-evident to you, but it's probably what I've learned from you. And that is, there's three real things that we gain from working together as in interfaith and working together with interfaith and social action, or righteous action, as I like to call it. A, of course, the main goal, which is improving our society. But there's two additional benefits, which is that faiths become a beacon of light. When we work together, we become a bigger beacon of light to the world, bringing a good name to faith at a time where, to a certain extent, religion is becoming marginalized. And of course, the relationships between the faiths develop. The former Chief Rabbi Sachs spoke of two types of relationship that can be forged in interfaith. One he called as face-to-face, which is dialogue, sharing our respective beliefs, foods, our cultures. It's a long and slow process undertaken by rare and special people. And he says, I quote, "can easily be undone." And the other type of relationship which can be forged is what he calls a side-by-side relationship, which happens when people of different faiths, instead of talking together, do together. They do social or righteous action together, recognizing that whatever our faith, we still need food, shelter, safety and security. And I commend this community for doing so much work, for example, with homelessness. I'm just going to finish off. Sorry. I'd like to finish off with a little story. Because we speak of social action and probably we think of huge projects and programs, and possibly we may think, oh, how could I get involved? What can I do? Can I really make a change? I want to tell you a story. It happens to be about an Orthodox Jewish lady, but substitute this for a person of your faith or anybody you like, or of no faith. In his book, Civility, author Stephen Carter, an American, writes that at age 10, he moved to Washington to an exclusive white area. He was a black man. He sat on the doorstep of his new home with his brother and sister, and nobody looked at them. He reflects on how he felt as a 10-year-old black boy. We should never have come here, he writes. This is no place for us. He writes, as I was thinking these thoughts, a lady across the street looked at our direction and gave us a huge smile. She had parcels in her arms and she disappeared into her home. 5 minutes later, she came out with cookies, this is in America, and drinks for me and my brother and sister, and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. Salam alaikum. It's good to have you." And he concludes in his book, Civility. This lady was Sarah Kastenbaum, an Orthodox Jewish lady. And he said, Jews have a word for this thing, we mentioned it, chesed, kindness, especially to strangers. And he said that moment changed his life. He went on to become a law professor at Yale University. You see, acts of kindness don't need to be grandiose, they don't need to hit the headlines or win us awards or recognitions. It's the small acts of kindness that we perform for little people in this world that creates a fabric, the fabric of our society, a fabric woven out of righteousness, justice, and compassion. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you.